F-I-E-L-D, Dangerfield.
All right there. Now, I haven't watched this yet, but it's Good Morning Britain, and it's the student union at Oxford University. Yeah, Oxford, one of the once world's most respected academic institutions. They've banned clapping. And, you know, we were laughing at this stuff a few years ago when it was just a few lunatics on Tumblr. But as is the way with these things, it's permeated through culture and now is on daytime television. And Oxford University. Now, like I say, I haven't watched this, so we'll enjoy it together. Let's go.
Let's take the serious side of this first. What
The serious side, which is...
What is upsetting, genuinely, about clapping?
So it's actually not just for people with anxiety, it's also people who use hearing aids. Clapping can be disruptive to that. People who have sensory processing issues, it can be very distressing and overwhelming to have this.
Oh, right, okay, so just because 0.00001% of the population wear hearing aids, the rest of us have got to stop fucking clapping. What about, I don't know, talking? Does that interfere with hearing aids as well?
It's loud, sudden noises.
But it is part of our culture.
Yeah, it is what we do, yeah.
Isn't it, to clap? If you go to the theatre, or you go to a lecture, or you go to a performance, or you go to a gig.
I mean, if you go to a gig and you can't handle loud noises, you've got bigger problems than the distress of clapping around you.
You would expect that people would clap.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could be preventing people from going to those events.
Oh, I never thought of it like that. Stop clapping, you bastards. There's people sitting at home quaking in their boots that they can't go to the firework
Which is a real shame. So if some theatres or some universities say, actually, we're going to be more inclusive.
More inclusive. But you don't realise you're excluding lots of other really basic, significant things that everyone does to include this ridiculous minority who, I'm sorry, darling, are going to have to put up with the fact that they've got this particular problem. There are consequences to having problems. That's why they're called problems. This is absurd. It reminds me of that comedian who said... I can't remember her name, the Danish bird. And she said, if you've got any particular issues, email me before you come to the gig and I'll try and accommodate you. Oh, sure, you can imagine the audience, every one bloke sitting by the door, another person asking for no laughing. And I mean that, no laughing, because even the comedian, I can't remember her bloody name, but she even said she doesn't like the sound of laughter. It feels like people are sticking knives in her. So can everyone just stop fucking laughing? And someone else wants people to stop clapping. This person over here doesn't like eye contact. You've got to keep the doors open because this person here. Yeah, do you see the problem with inclusion? Yeah, when you start including everyone, you start excluding everything.
And do jazz hands instead.
Jazz hands instead. Instead of jazz hands, how about that?
That'd be lovely. More people could get involved.
And
she even knows that this is embarrassing. Look at her face when she says it.
Actually, we're going to be more inclusive and do jazz hands instead. That'd be lovely. More people could get involved.
And
you absolute teabag.
And what would be the penalty if you clapped?
Bullet in the back of the head.
I don't think there's going to be a penalty.
Oh, fuck it, no problem then.
Frankly, I don't think anyone's going to say, like, you need to leave.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll see about that. You know, we'll see where that goes.
But if you...
Because I remember there was someone at one university who put their hand up, and it turned out the week before putting your hand up was barred and she got ousted.
You were persisting with clapping.
Persisting with clapping. Clapping in and of itself is a persistent thing. It's like once you've got to do it more than once. You've got to persist with it for it to be clapping. That isn't really a clap. Unless, of course, it could be some kind of Zen response, you know, the sound of no hands clapping. Bing!
Even though you've been requested to do something that's not very polite, is it?
Oh, not very polite, because that's what we want in your brave new utopia.
Like, I think people understand if you're requested to do something in a specific context, you can do it.
Would it stop you, Andrew, if you were somewhere and you felt the urge to clap someone and yet they'd said, we don't clap here?
Well, no, it wouldn't. But what we don't do is completely restructure society and completely change societal norms in order to accommodate the sensibilities of a few people.
Exactly that. Of course we don't.
It's interesting, just reading a story about this on the BBC News website. An individual called Hannah from Weymouth in Dorset she struggles with loud noises like clapping.
Stay at home, Hannah.
She was diagnosed with autism when she...
Well, she's got an issue. And all right, she's got an issue. But as the man said, we don't restructure our entire society to accommodate ridiculously small minorities of people. It just doesn't make sense. The sacrifice is too great. They have to accommodate themselves by what they choose to do, not the rest of us. That's how it works.
She was 23.
Because if we don't do that, what we end up doing is coming down to the lowest common denominator. Someone here doesn't like this, someone here doesn't like that, this person doesn't like that, you don't want to hear this, can't say that, can't do that. Yeah, we end up silent, doing nothing. The logical conclusion of this kind of thinking is no one does or says anything.
She says, I don't agree with a ban on clapping. Instead, let's raise awareness of autism, because this could breed resentment if other students start to harbour bad feelings towards autistic people.
Great weaponised autism there.
Or perhaps other people who object to clapping. I mean, that is a danger, don't you think? That there are people who would say, why are we banning everything just for a small proportion of people, and blaming them?
I think that's definitely possible, but we shouldn't kind of meet the expectations of those judgmental people. There's a lot of anger towards people with allergies as well. Say on planes, if you're not allowed to have nuts, you'll find people saying, oh, I can't believe I'm not allowed to have my Snickers bar or whatever.
No, what a pathetic way of pointing it out. Yeah, it's insane that there's no nuts allowed within 5 miles of a school because of one person. They need to look out for what they're eating, not everyone else.
Yeah, but having nuts on a plane is not sort of part of our cultural heritage. Clapping...
It bloody is. Having a little handful of nuts and a pint of mild. What are you talking about, darling? Sit your ass down. I've got work to do. Know what I mean?
In a gig and in a theatre is just a totally normal thing to do.
It's totally normal, but that doesn't mean it can't change.
Oh, these people. Absolutely no grasp of reality. What do you want from the world, woman? Zero.
Actually, is this a sign of the fact that we are accommodating, sort of maybe over-accommodating
You think so?
people
Absolutely.
who complain about stuff, while acknowledging it can cause problems for some people, but not changing?
I think that's what's so worrying about all of this. Actually, it's not just about the jazz hands, the clapping thing. It's about the broader culture. You know, what this is about a broader attempt to infantilise our student body, right? So it ties into things to do with trigger warnings and safe spaces, and to basically coddle students, when actually what university is about is educating them for life in the real world. You go out into the real world, people are going to be applauding in theatres, at sports events. If you talk to...
Just that he's even having to give examples. I mean, you know, university is meant to be preparing people for the world, but, you know, I can think of at least 3 places in the real world where you'll be clapping. Jesus, university should be intense, it should be engaging, it should be terrifying, it should be passionate, it should be... Learning is the heart, is the throbbing heart of human progress. And it's been turned into a fucking mental hospital. It's been turned into group therapy.
Any major sports person, they'll tell you that actually it's the applause that keeps them going, it stimulates them. It's really important.
Greg on Twitter says, honestly...
I mean, you know, you argue with fools, you become a fool. I can't believe old Doyley there, the comic, is having to say these things. It's making him look ridiculously stupid. You know, at a football match, it's the crowd cheering. It eggs them on, you know.
A room full of people with odd expressions doing jazz hands at me would make me feel a lot more anxious than if they were actually clapping. And there is a sense, isn't there, the vast majority of our audience are getting in touch, very few saying, I think this is a good idea.
And the fact of the matter is, as you say, you know, perhaps at university people might be okay with that, but they have to go into the real world at some point, don't they?
You know what, I feel for this bird, because she's caught up in the whole social justice thing. She's part of the student union. She's having to accommodate the most stupid ideas of the whole university. And 3 or 4 years after university, once she's actually started working in the real world, she's going to look back on this and be like, oh, fuck, was I really that person? Yes, you were.
Yeah, and the real world could change. Maybe.
Ah, the real world could change. You know, it's no surprise that she has to take on the physicality of a cute little 4-year-old child trying to get sweets out of his grandmother to try and persuade people to take on this shit. Because as yet again, it's immature thinking, it's childlike. The left are all babies. They have not developed. They don't have mature thoughts. It's unsophisticated. It's based on ridiculously young outlook on the world. Might change. Flutters eyelashes.
Maybe we'll become more inclusive, which would be a great thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to be over-accommodating.
Oh, well, there you've hit the nail on the head. I don't think it's a bad thing to become over-accommodating. Well, you might want to think it's a bad thing because there's a sacrifice when you over-accommodate. That's why it's called over-accommodation. Things are sacrificed. Things are lost on the way to over-accommodate, to over-include. And oh, one day everyone will be there. There'll be someone at the gig who can't see or hear or touch or smell. But that doesn't matter because there's nothing on the fucking stage because we over-accommodated to include the fucking dummy.
I think that's lovely. That's something really nice about millennials.
That's lovely. It's something that's really nice about millennials. Yeah, they're carving a brave new world. You're at Oxford University. You've got the potential to learn in one of the most beautiful environments. You've got loads of money, clearly. You've got amazing professors. And you're fucking around, wasting your time talking about clapping. You pathetic larvae.
But it kind of eats itself. I mean, when this first got mooted back in 2015 by the Women's Conference at the NUS, there were people who were then
Right, what a surprise.
saying, yeah, but are jazz hands an example of cultural appropriation? Is that therefore a form of racism? What about
Mommy.
blind people who can't hear the applause anymore? So you often get into these...
There you go. Blind people can't hear it. It's not very inclusive for them. So it's going to be one jazz hand, and then your free hand, you smack any blind people around the head, include them. I mean, everyone's happy now.
sort of knots, and I just think it's and I have to say, actually, to be honest, one of the things that really annoys me about this is it kind of enables people to paint students as these sort of weak, fragile snowflakes.
Yeah.
Actually, it's just a minority of students who tend to go into student politics.
Who've got the loudest voices, they're ridiculously well funded, and they get to say what everyone else is going to do. The bastards. And from my experience, it's the student union types who go on to jobs who end up leading people, getting involved in other unions, getting places where they're starting to dictate policy and things. I don't know, Parliament.
Who like throwing their weight around, who have this kind of a coddling idea, and they want
Quite a significant student union, though. Oxford is one of the most prestigious in the world.
Well, no, it certainly used to be, but listen to the sort of shit that's coming out of the sewer now.
It tends to be the most economically privileged who tend to push for this victimhood thing.
Amazing, good point, Doily.
I mean, studies tell us that's again and again. And the problem is it does play into the hands of the people who want to smear an entire generation. I mean, I've done talks at universities. Students, on the whole, are just sick of this stuff.
What a surprise, and what a nice surprise, because this is bullshit. That's an amazing point that I wasn't aware of. I'll hold my hands up to that. It is the most economically privileged that tend to dwell on the social justice, yeah, because they've got nothing else to offer, and it's an easy thing for them to get involved with. Throwing their justice weight around.
And they hate the fact that these minority represent them, misrepresent them, and people just end up writing off an entire generation.
You have an alter ego, Tatiana McGrath, who's on Twitter. Have you, I mean, and you get quite provocative.
That's Titania McGrath. I didn't know that. Good lad.
Of
Sure,
the woke generation on Twitter. Have you ever been a victim of the cancel culture?
Well, no, I haven't been cancelled because I say what I want and I provoke when I want to. But
Well,
although
other people have.
If by cancel culture you mean people abused me online and I've lost work over it, then yes, that is true. But I wouldn't say that I've been cancelled because I just
They've dropped that other bird out. Dull as fuck. You know, it'd be nice if things changed. Just talking about Titania McGrath now.
what I want.
Yeah.
And actually, it seems to do me quite well. You know.
We're going to have to
You're
leave
here
it
this
there.
morning.
Exactly.
That foolish woman had nothing to offer.
Andrew, thank you for joining us. Alan, thanks for coming in as well,
Yeah,
sharing your
good
points
to see you.
of view. Stephanie makes that point about I'm registered blind. I wouldn't see if someone was doing jazz hands at me. How is this inclusive?
Ellen, what do you say to that?
It's inclusive to deaf people, and we can do a lot of other things to make it more inclusive to visually impaired people.
And how would you do that?
I don't know yet.
Yeah, how? I don't know. Oh, you haven't thought of that. You've thought enough about the inclusion for deaf people to come on Good Morning Britain and say 4 words in your little sweet face. But when it comes to blind people, I haven't thought about that. Oh, you fucking should. What are you, some kind of bigot?
Thanks for watching.
Now we're going to ask the Ravettes to help us do the next tune.